Hi everybody, so I'm Sarah Ficken. I'm a dairy farmer in central New York. And I just wanted to share with you guys a little bit about how we've adapted to climate change on our farm. A little bit of our background, basically all those fields you see are either fields that we own or fields that we work. The section in the middle, that's all pasture that we've slowly reclaimed from shrubland. My husband and I met at Cornell. He was a non-traditional student. I had graduated and I was working for the federal government. A couple of poorly timed shutdowns and almost shutdowns made us decide that dairy farming was much more reliable and sustainable. So we bought some cows and we moved to Madison County. His background is in dairy farming and mine is more in applied ecology. So the background I bring is to manage sort of the whole ecosystem of the farm, as opposed to just managing the farm the way, Grandpa did. And so that's sort of allowed us to adapt maybe a little bit more quickly than some of our neighbors. You can sort of see in the center is our farmstead. Our house is right here. The milk house is right there, as is our old barn. The milk house and our old barn were built in 2013 after a barn fire. And then we put up a new barn, also a cow barn, and a heifer facility in 2015. So that's just a little bit of background. Oh, and everything looks nice and flat on the screen. It's actually a giant slope. We try not to work anything greater than a B slope. So quickly, I said my background is in sort of managing the farm as an ecosystem as opposed to a dairy farm. So we decided when we put up the barn that we were going to do a composted bedded pack. The advantage of this and sort of how it relates to extreme weather events is that the composted bedded pack gives us about a year of manure storage. And it also allows us to store our nutrients, so that our manure basically, so that we can apply them when they won't run off into the stream. We're not tied to daily haul. We're able to store about 6 months from the scrape alley, and on the pack we're able to store about a year, so we can time our manure applications to when they'll be most beneficial and taken up by the plant. We also really like our barn because it's really comfortable for the cows, and we've been talking about heat stress a lot. We typically have a wind that comes out of the west, and so we made our barn so that it has a 10-foot opening on the west hand, well, on both sides actually, and the wind just comes right through. We tend to not have a lot of heat stress, and the cows tend to really like the barn. When we had started farming, we didn't intend for the cows to be in the barn 11 months of the year as they are now. We had initially, intended to graze. And our first couple of years, we put together a really awesome rotational grazing system. We were moving them every 12 hours. The cows were performing really well. They really liked it, except for when it was hot, when it was cold, when it rained, when it hailed, or when it was too sunny. And so we basically ended up with the cows sitting at the barnyard gate, just waiting to come in, not on pasture. So the grazing system was a strategy, not necessarily that we implemented because of climate change. We implemented it because we thought it was the best management practice, and I'm sure it is on a lot of farms. But for us and for our setup, our cows didn't like it. So now we only really graze our dry cows and our heifers. Something else we did to sort of help diversify, while dairy farming felt stable, I did know that low prices were going to come at some point, and so we do have a small CSA. We direct market fruits, vegetables, some of our beef, as well as some maple syrup and honey and eggs from our neighbors' kids. So we try to, get out into the public, bring people to the farm, and also diversify our income streams. So we had all these great ideas about what the farm would look like when we bought it. We had cows, but they were at a neighbor's farm, and so we had almost an entire year on the farm without animals, where we could dream about, these perfect grazing systems and these awesome barns, and we were never going to have runoff or any of these bad things. And then reality hit. And we were sitting at the bottom of our hill with a ton of runoff and systems that were working, but not necessarily as well as we would like. And we had frameworks, and we were troubleshooting one section of it or another section of it. And then I got introduced to the Adaptation workbook. If any of you guys are working with farmers, the Adaptation workbook is a really awesome tool. It's really a holistic overview of how do you farm in the face of changing climate, extreme weather conditions. Honestly, it's a good financial management tool as well. I think it's really awesome. And so with the adaptation workbook in mind, we started making whole system changes and moving towards bigger goals. We weren't just adding fans in the parlor. We were thinking about how it fit. And so going through the next 8 slides, I'm going to talk about some specific challenges that we faced, as well as the adaptations that we implemented or that we're thinking of implementing. So extreme precipitation. I mentioned that cows don't like hail. They don't like extreme rain. They really just, they don't like to be outside in this weather. And this is a picture. I'm bringing the cows in for milking. They made it to the barn before the skies opened up. I did not. And extreme precipitation has been a challenge for us, not just because the cows don't like to be out in it, but because we end up with periods of, really, really wet soil that we can't get on. You can see in this picture, that's a field of peas and oats, I think, or it might be corn. That was a bad year. That was a drought year. That was the year before we switched to no-till, because we were just seeing all of our soil, all of our hard-earned organic matter and nutrients just washing down the hill. And it just was a really bad situation. So some of the adaptations that we made or are making to deal with extreme precipitation, we rerouted the laneway. From the best I can determine from talking to our neighbors, the laneway on our farm has been in the same location for at least 100 years. And it's never moved. And like I said, we're on a hill farm. The slope they're about to go down is at least a C slope. It might be a D slope in places, and the laneway's just been compacted, and it's a really great, race course for the water to run down the hill. So I think in our second year on our farm, we moved the laneway. We weren't able to move all of it, but we were able to move enough of it that we captured a lot of the water at the top of the hill and ran it a different direction, and it's made the runoff at the bottom of the hill a lot better. Another way we've sort of managed our extreme precipitation is that the milkers stay inside 11 months out of the year. It's not necessarily the same 11 months, but they'll probably go out, I'm guessing, for about 2 weeks in late April, early May, and then they'll go out again for another 2 weeks, probably around the end of September. The cows are really comfortable in the barn, and we're able to manage the pastures less intensively because the heifers and dry cows have a much lower nutritional requirement than the milkers do. And so we're able to give them more space, so if the pastures are a little bit wet, they don't pug up the pastures. We're just able to manage our land a lot better to deal with the extreme weather. We also made the switch to no-till 2 years ago. Our erosion, we switched to no-till for a number of reasons, but our erosion, right away we saw a difference. We also switched to strip cropping at the same time, so I think there was a synergistic effect there. But no-till has definitely been game-changing for us. We also improved the tiling at the base of the hill. We were ending up with just the swamp in our barnyard, and we were able to tile it better, get the water moving, capture some of the water. And one of the adaptations we're hoping to implement is either put gutters on the barn roof so we can collect the water and then water the cows with it, or we're not quite sure because gutters fall off. We could also punch holes in the top of the barn and have the water go through that way. We're not quite sure, but we need to deal with the water coming off of the roofs. So, and then this is a really awesome tool. I absolutely love the Facebook page that our Weather Service NOAA people maintain out of Binghamton. They are really, really up to date. I do try to check the weather at least twice a day, but in the summer when there are extreme storms or tornado warnings or bad weather coming, they update it and it's here and you can just check it. And farming has been made a lot easier because we have this Facebook page to reference. Okay, so another challenge we faced has been drought. We've experienced drought 2 of the years we've been farming out of the 5, and my husband was working as a herdsman on a farm the year before that, and he experienced a drought as well. A drought is really bad for a lot of reasons, but for us, specifically on our farm, the drought we had in 2016 almost put us out of business. We saw like 90% crop failure, and we were purchasing in feed starting basically January 1st because we'd run out. And with milk prices the way they are, the financial strain was almost too much. Honestly, it might have been too much and we were just too stubborn to give up. I don't know. But drought is definitely, from a business perspective, as well as from a environmental perspective, really, really challenging. So some of the things that we are doing to manage for drought: we've diversified our crop rotation. We're not betting the farm on corn anymore like we did in 2016. Last year we planted Sudan grass, which worked really, really well for us, even though it was cool and dry, which isn't what Sudan grass typically likes. It did give us the tonnage that we were looking for, and then we followed it up with triticale. And the triticale, while we weren't able to harvest it, got really well established, and we're looking at getting 4 tons an acre probably this spring if it ever stops snowing. Something else we've done is we've considered irrigation for vegetables. Like I said, we have a small CSA, and each year I end up hand watering everything, and so we're moving towards irrigation more quickly than I initially thought we would. I figured the rain would just supply it, and that's not the case. Another thing is we had to put in a well. We've run out of water 5 of the last 5 summers. Even when it's just normal dry, not droughty, we don't have enough water, so we had to put in a real well instead of a dug well. We switched to no-till with cover crops. That tends to keep in the soil moisture and has just been a really good practice. And a strategy we're considering is using runoff to water the animals. We have some really good drainages that run through our farm, and trying to capture some of that as well. So some of the tools, Climate Smart Farming has the water deficit calculator, which has been really, really useful to us, both thinking about short term, where are we going in the imminent future, and also thinking longer term and what sort of patterns might we be seeing. The seasonal drought outlook is also really helpful and another tool that we use. The second to last challenge I want to talk about is the harvest window. Our harvest windows, it feels like, are getting shorter and shorter and more unpredictable. The springs have been cold or warm, but like warm in April and then cold, and it's been rainy, and the crops just aren't drying out, which means we need to be able to get on that field and take that window as soon as we can. So things that we've done, we've diversified our cropping system. So we have alfalfa, which has a longer interval period than some of the grass hay that we put up. So we're not trying to cut 100 acres of hay in a window. We're putting down 20 acres at a time, and then we have some in summer annual as well. And this allows us to at least get some of it when it's at peak quality. We've also invested in larger equipment. We had larger and more reliable equipment. We had a baler that could kind of mostly do the job some of the time, but sometimes you would have to give it a couple days and whatever. We went out, we spent what seemed like an inordinate amount of money on a baler last April, and it had paid for itself halfway through the season, just on increased speed, the quality of crop we were able to put up, and the fact that it was rotocut instead of regular. So getting slightly larger equipment and improving the reliability of the equipment, and also making sure that all the other things are done on the farm so that we can take the window, have really been key to taking any available window. We're one of the few farms in our county that actually put up high quality first cutting feed, because on May 8th, my husband was ready to go and cut hay, and he cut hay. The next window we got was May 22nd. And by then, the quality of the crop just wasn't there. And we've also increased our acreage. We started renting the field across the road, which is about 25 acres, so we increased what we were farming by about 33%. And that's helped us, it helps us buffer. We don't have to produce as many tons from a given area. Something we've used is the growing degree day calculator. I happen to like the Climate Smart Farming one. I like all the projections and all the different lines. It really helps us make good decisions. And finally, and I've put the slide in and I've taken the slide out and I've put the slide in, but this is kind of the elephant in the room. Right now, we're farming in a very difficult economy. Milk prices are not covering the cost of production, both in conventional farming and also in organic. I think the organic guys I was talking to yesterday were saying they're seeing a $7 cut in their milk price, which is huge. I mean, they're still making more than we are, but that's huge. Their cost of production is higher as well. It's just a really challenging time to be any kind of farmer. I mean, you have grain farmers out west who've been struggling for a while now too. Even small CSAs or large CSAs, vegetable farms, are finding that they don't have a market for their product like they did 5 years ago. So yes, it's a very gloomy farm economy. And climate change definitely doesn't help. I work off the farm. I get to go and I get to talk to adults every day, and I get to do cool things, and I get to be at places like this. My husband doesn't get to get off the farm. And when he's going out for the 10th day in a row and it's just been so cold that, his eyelashes are freezing together, well, that's not climate change. It's still really, really demoralizing. Or when he's sitting there and not quite sure, what do we plant for next year? We're still trying to figure out what our summer annual will be because we don't know what the weather will be. And I realize, 100 years ago, you didn't know what the weather was going to be either, but you at least had an idea from the previous season of what you could expect. And it seems like we're diverging more and more from that, and that every year is either really, really wet or really, really dry, or really, really wet and really, really dry, which is it's challenging. How do you plan for that? So some of the things that we've done to try to mitigate the farm economy as they relate to climate change, we did sign up for a CSP contract. And that's something that I definitely encourage a lot of producers to do. Ours was mostly nutrient management, and it was also focused on, letting field mice escape from cattle waterers. So we built them little ramps and now they can get out. And we also signed up for an EQUIP program, got a high tunnel. And there have been other, both through NRCS and also through our soil and water programs that we've been able to sign up for. Theoretically, we're adapting to climate change, or we're mitigating the effects of runoff or something like that, but they've definitely also helped our bottom line, and they've been practices that we either wanted to adopt and couldn't because of the financial cost, and they've bridged the financial cost, or with CSP, you get paid for practices you're already doing, and so that's kind of a nice pat on the back with a little nice paycheck to go along with it. And then there are also opportunities. Climate change is challenging for a lot of reasons, and how do you adapt to it? Right now, my husband is super excited because we're going to start double cropping. I kind of think that may not work, but I also think that it's worth a try. If we're seeing maybe slightly longer seasons, and if we're able to put in slightly shorter day crops, maybe we have a good chance to do double cropping. The Munnsville State College, their high tunnel, is looking at putting in tomato plants on April 20th, which is really, really early. But maybe they'll grow it. Maybe we'll have tomatoes in June. I don't know. And 4 of the last 5 years, we've had cows out on pasture through December. And that's been a really cool opportunity. Especially with dry cows and heifers. The longer I can keep them out of the barn, the happier I am. And the happier they are. And so there are these opportunities, and if you can look at the opportunities and figure out how they can work with the environment that we're in right now, I think that, that could be a good thing. So overall, lessons learned: be flexible, but not too flexible. You need to be able to, as a farmer, adapt to anything that comes your way, or at least deal with whatever comes your way. But you also have to know what you're shooting for and why you're shooting for it. You need to know your resources, whether it's NRCS or soil and water or cooperative extension or the neighbor next door or the neighbor across the valley. As farmers, there are a lot of good resources to tap, and looking at them for help when you need help, I think, is really important. Be prepared, whether it's the tornado that went through 3 years ago and killed 4 people across the valley from us, and all of a sudden there was debris all over our fields, and we needed to figure out how to deal with that. Or it's that snowstorm, the 3rd nor'easter we're on right now, and all of a sudden we have 17 inches of snow at home that we weren't quite expecting. Being prepared, I think, is really the key for anything, and keeping your buildings in good shape and your animals in good health. And then also remembering that there's always next year. We always get the chance to try again. So that is it.
I'm just interested, how do you use the degree day chart? What do you do with that?
I do a lot less than that. I do a lot less with that than my husband does. But basically, there's a tool developed by Jerry Cherney at Cornell, where you look at alfalfa heights and percentage of alfalfa to determine the forage quality of the field. And so what we do is we then look at the growing degree days. If we see that there's a rain event coming on your perfect day to cut in terms of quality and quantity, we'll look at the growing degree day tool and decide whether we should cut before that event or after that event. So it's sort of a short-term, it helps us with short-term planning.
I was wondering whether you have thought about harvesting the rainwater or runoff into a pond or some sort of investment into a tank so you can use it during the drought that hit you guys in 2016, I believe you mentioned.
So yes, we've definitely improved the pond at the top of the hill, and that got us through a bit of 2017 at the end when it was dry. We'd be interested in stockpiling actually underground in tanks, but that's a lot of money. And right now that's not an option unless some government program comes along and offers us tanks.